Open that toolbox right now. The words cut across the Invention hall so sharply that even the security guard's hand froze on the rusty handle. Marcus Brooks stood with one arm in front of his 9-year-old son while Noah, eyes wide behind crooked glasses, held a yellow drawing he had pulled from beneath the old wrenches. Victor Lang smiled like a gentleman and reached for the paper. "It's just junk, ma'am." CO Evelyn Carter did not blink. "Then why are you trying to hide it?" 3 hours earlier, the same toolbox sat on the cracked vinyl seat of Marcus's old pickup, rattling softly every time the truck hit a seam in the road. The morning light had not fully burned through the gray over Atlanta yet, and the air inside the cab smelled of engine oil, pencil shavings, and the peppermint gum Noah always chewed when he was nervous. Marcus drove with both hands steady on the wheel, his denim jacket faded at the elbows, his work boots clean but old, his gloves folded beside the gearshift like he still believed respect began with showing up prepared. Noah sat beside him in a button-down shirt too stiff for his small shoulders, hugging the toolbox against his knees. "Dad," he said, "what if they don't like it?" Marcus kept his eyes on the road. "Then we thank them for their time." Noah looked down at the rust along the metal latch. "What if they laugh?" For a moment, Marcus's jaw tightened, not with anger, but with the kind of pain a father tries to swallow before his child can see it. "Then we stand straight." He reached over and tapped 2 fingers gently against the lid. "Your mama put too much work in that box for us to bend over shame." The Carter Dynamics Innovation Fair rose ahead of them in glass and steel, banners snapping in the wind, camera crews unloading tripods, young founders stepping out of rideshares in pressed suits and polished shoes. Marcus parked near the service entrance because the main lot was full, then carried the toolbox himself even when Noah offered to help. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed over polished floors. The place smelled nothing like a garage. It smelled like new carpet, fresh coffee, expensive cologne, and money that had never had to explain itself. At the registration desk, a woman in a black blazer looked Marcus up and down before she looked at his printed confirmation email. Her smile stayed in place, but her eyes cooled. "Vendor repairs are through the loading bay." Marcus slid the paper closer. "We're not vendors." Marcus Brooks. Booth C17. Adaptive Thermal Control Module. The woman typed, paused, typed again. Behind her, Victor Lang crossed the lobby surrounded by 2 assistants and a judge in a navy suit. His display case carried a sleek black device under white lights, and on the poster behind it were 3 words Marcus had written years ago in Lena's notebook: thermal pulse bypass. Marcus noticed them before anyone noticed him noticing. The woman at registration cleared her throat. "I'm sorry. There's no active application under that name." Noah's hand found the toolbox handle. Marcus glanced at the email on his phone, then at the screen turned slightly away from him. "Ma'am, that confirmation came from your system." She stamped a red mark on the temporary badge and pushed it back. "Invalid." The sound was small, almost soft, but Noah flinched as if it had hit the table like a hammer. Victor slowed just long enough to smile. "Tough room," he said lightly, his voice smooth enough that nobody could call it cruel. Marcus did not answer. He only folded the rejected badge once, slipped it into his pocket, and looked toward the glowing poster again, where his dead wife's words were standing under another man's name. Marcus kept his eyes on Victor's poster a second too long, and Noah noticed. Children notice the things adults try to hide. The boy's fingers tightened around the toolbox handle until the rusty latch gave a tiny metallic click. "Dad." Marcus gently covered Noah's hand with his own. "Not here," he said. "We breathe first." The registration woman slid the invalid badge farther across the counter as if distance could make the problem cleaner. "Mr. Brooks, I understand this is disappointing, but we can't let unverified participants onto the exhibit floor." Her voice was polished, trained, almost kind. Behind her, the scanner beeped for another contestant. Green light. Proved welcome. Marcus held up his phone again, the confirmation email bright against his dark, oil-scarred fingers. The timestamp says 7:42 p.m., March 14th. It has the Carter Dynamics intake code. Screenshots can be edited. It's not a screenshot. Sir, please lower your voice. Marcus had not raised it. That was what made the silence around them sting harder. Two young men in matching event polos looked over from the coffee table. One whispered something about garage guys trying anything for a grant, and the other laughed through his nose. Noah looked at his shoes. Marcus saw it, and that hurt more than the red invalid stamp in his pocket. He turned slightly, putting his body between his son and the room. My son doesn't need to hear that, he said quietly. The woman's smile thinned. No one is insulting your son. Victor, still close enough to enjoy the scene but far enough to look innocent, stepped back toward them with his hands open. Maybe there's a simple misunderstanding, he said, warm and public, the kind of voice that made strangers trust him before they knew him. Innovation fairs attract passionate people. Sometimes passion gets ahead of paperwork. The judge beside him chuckled softly. His name badge read Gerald Whitman, Technical Review Panel. He smelled faintly of aftershave and hotel coffee, and his cufflinks flashed each time he moved his hand. Marcus looked from Victor to Whitman, then back to the poster. Thermal pulse bypass. The phrase sat there in glossy white letters above Victor's sleek black prototype. Too familiar to be coincidence. Too specific to be borrowed from a brochure. Where did you get that term? Marcus asked. Victor blinked once. Only once. Then he smiled wider. Industry language, Mr. Brooks, was it? I wrote that line. Whitman stepped forward before the sentence could breathe. Sir, accusations require documentation, and according to our system, you don't have standing here. His tone was not loud. It was worse than loud. It was official. A security guard appeared near the velvet rope, not touching Marcus, only standing close enough to tell everyone which side of the rope mattered. Noah opened his mouth, then closed it when Marcus gave him a small shake of the head. Not fear. Discipline. The boy looked down at the toolbox again, at the old dents along the lid, at the strip of duct tape his mother had once wrapped around the handle because it pinched fingers. Marcus crouched just enough to straighten Noah's collar. You did nothing wrong, he said. Remember that. A camera crew rolled past them toward Victor's booth, its wheels clicking over the polished floor. One of the assistants in Victor's circle lifted a tablet, and Marcus caught a glimpse of a schedule marked CEO walkthrough, 10:30. The same assistant quickly tilted the screen away. At the far end of the lobby, the glass doors opened, and a woman in a cream suit entered without hurry. Conversations softened around her before anyone said her name. Evelyn Carter did not look at Marcus first. She looked at Victor's poster, then at the security guard blocking a father and child beside the registration desk, then at the toolbox on the floor between them. Her eyes paused there for half a second, not recognition, not belief, just a small interruption in the rhythm of power. Victor noticed her noticing and stepped smoothly into her line of sight. Ms. Carter, he said, bright as stage lights. We had a minor registration issue, but it's being handled. Evelyn's gaze shifted to Marcus's folded badge, the red invalid mark showing through the thin paper in his pocket. Then her eyes moved to Whitman, whose hand was already resting over the intake clipboard as if covering something that might speak. Whitman's hand stayed on the intake clipboard for 1 second too long, and Marcus saw it. He did not reach for it. He did not accuse him. He had learned over the years that some doors only closed faster when a man like him pushed too hard in front of people who had already decided he did not belong. Evelyn Carter stood several yards away, studying the scene with the careful stillness of someone who had been lied to before, but Victor stepped neatly between her and the registration desk. We're on schedule, he said. The prototype is ready for your walkthrough. At that exact moment, a sharp horn sounded from the loading corridor, followed by the grind of a starter failing twice. One of the event workers cursed under his breath. Another voice called, "The lift is dead. We've got Carter's demo rack stuck by the freight door." The registration woman's face tightened. Whitman glanced toward the sound, annoyed, while Victor's smile flickered just enough for Marcus to notice. The security guard gestured toward the exit. Sir, you and your son need to clear this area. Marcus looked down at Noah. The boy was still holding the toolbox, His small fingers wrapped around the handle with the seriousness of a child carrying something heavier than metal. "Come on," Marcus said softly. "We'll step aside." They moved toward the loading corridor, not because Marcus had surrendered, but because he would not let Noah watch grown people turn disrespect into a show. The hallway smelled different from the lobby. No perfume, no polished coffee bar, no clean carpet. Back there, the air carried warm rubber, cardboard dust, machine grease, and the sour edge of panic. A forklift sat crooked near the freight door with a tall steel rack strapped to it, packed with Carter Dynamics demo equipment under black protective covers. 2 workers in orange vests were kneeling beside it. One kept turning the key. Click, click, nothing. "If this doesn't move in 5 minutes, we're done," one of them said. "They're going to blame us." Marcus should have kept walking. His own badge had been rejected. His son had been humiliated. The poster with Lena's stolen words was glowing 20 yards away under another man's name. But he stopped anyway because the sound from the lift was wrong in a way he knew. Not dead battery. Not starter. A burned ground lead clicking against a loose bracket. He set the toolbox down. Noah looked up at him. "Dad." Marcus flexed his fingers once, then opened the lid. "Stay by the wall. Okay? Are you fixing it?" "Just enough so nobody gets crushed by a deadline." The worker nearest him looked up, startled. "You maintenance?" "No, sir." Marcus pulled on one worn glove. "But your ground is arcing. If you keep turning that key, you'll fry the controller." The man hesitated. People often hesitated. When help came from someone they had already been told to ignore. Then the lift clicked again by itself, and hesitation became fear. "Can you look?" Marcus did not smile. He simply knelt on the cold concrete, reached into the toolbox, and pulled out a short length of copper wire wrapped around an old socket. The same toolbox that had made people smirk in the lobby now opened like a quiet answer. Under the wrenches, Noah saw the edge of the hidden tray shift slightly, the yellow corner of a folded drawing peeking out before Marcus nudged the rag back over it. "Noribil." "Not yet. Just a glimpse of something protected." Marcus loosened the panel, bridged the ground, cleaned the contact with a strip of cloth, and tightened the bracket with the kind of patience that made the rushed men around him fall silent. From the corridor entrance, Evelyn had paused without announcing herself. She saw only part of it. The father on one knee, the boy pressed safely against the wall, the old toolbox open on the floor, and the event worker watching a stranger save him from a failure he would have been punished for. Victor saw it too from behind her shoulder, and his expression turned almost amused. "He's useful," he murmured, soft enough to sound harmless. "That's different from qualified." The engine caught. The forklift rumbled alive, low and steady. One worker exhaled so hard his shoulders dropped. "Man, you saved us." Marcus closed the panel and stood. "Have your electrical team replace that lead before you run it under load." "What do I owe you?" "Nothing." He wiped his fingers on his rag and picked up the toolbox. "Just don't blame the driver. This was maintenance, not operator error." The worker tore a service log from a clipboard and scribbled quickly before the rack rolled away. "Temporary bypass repaired by M. Brooks." Noah watched the paper disappear under the man's thumb. Evelyn's eyes followed it too. Marcus did not know she had seen. He only placed one hand on Noah's shoulder and guided him back toward the noise of the fair, unaware that the smallest kindness of the morning had just created the first record no one had planned to erase. The service rack rolled out of the loading corridor on time, but the kindness did not protect Marcus from suspicion. By the time he and Noah returned toward the exhibit floor, the story had already changed shape. Victor was standing beside Gerald Whitman near the demo entrance, speaking in that low professional voice people used when they wanted an accusation to sound like concern. "All I'm saying is, Ms. Carter, an unregistered man just opened a company transport unit minutes before my presentation. We don't know what he touched." Evelyn did not answer right away. Her eyes moved from Victor's polished shoes to the oil on Marcus's glove, then to the old toolbox in his hand. She was not cruel. She was careful. In her world, one loose wire could become a recall, One unverified person near a prototype could become a lawsuit, and one emotional explanation could hide a very expensive lie. "Mr. Brooks," she said, "did anyone authorize you to repair that lift?" Marcus glanced toward the worker who had driven the forklift away, but the man was already swallowed by the crowd. "No, ma'am." Whitman gave a small, satisfied breath. "That is exactly the issue." Noah stepped closer to his father's side. Marcus felt the boy's shoulder against his leg and lowered his voice. The ground lead was arcing. If they kept turning the key, the controller would have burned. Victor smiled gently, almost sadly. "That's a very specific diagnosis for someone who wasn't assigned there." Marcus looked at him then. "Not long. Just enough. Machines tell you things if you listen." A few people nearby chuckled, the soft kind of laughter that never wanted to be owned. Evelyn heard it, and something in her face tightened, but she still did not defend him. She turned instead toward the main stage, where Victor's sleek prototype sat under white lights like a jewel in a museum case. The black shell was smooth, expensive, untouched by grease. Behind it, the words "thermal pulse bypass" glowed across the screen. Marcus stopped walking. The air around him seemed to thin. The stage speakers hummed. Somewhere overhead, a vent clicked on. Under all of it, he heard the faint electrical whine from Victor's demo rig before it even powered up. Fully a thin, high sound like a mosquito trapped behind glass. His hand closed around the toolbox handle. Evelyn noticed the movement. Something wrong. Marcus did not step forward. "That pitch is too high." Whitman laughed once. "The unit is not even in active load yet. That's why it shouldn't be making that sound." Victor turned toward the stage technician. "Proceed." The technician pressed the sequence button. Blue light moved across the display. The crowd leaned in. For 4 seconds, the demo looked perfect. Then the whine sharpened. Noah covered one ear. Marcus placed a hand on the boy's back and moved him 2 steps behind a support column. Not dramatic, not panicked. Trained by years in garages where equipment failed without asking permission. "Back up," he said softly. "Just a little." Evelyn's eyes followed the movement before the smoke came. A gray thread curled from the side vent of the controller, thin at first, then darker. The technician killed the switch. The crowd murmured, chairs scraping, camera lenses shifting. Victor lifted both hands with a practiced calm. "Humidity in the hall," he said. "We expected minor calibration drift." Marcus looked at the smoke, then at the vent pattern, then at the poster again. "You didn't damp the pulse." The words were quiet, but Evelyn heard them. So did Victor. His head turned too fast. "That phrase is in my presentation," Victor said smoothly. "Repeating it doesn't make you an engineer." Marcus reached into his toolbox, not to pull anything out, only to move a rag away from the top tray. Beneath it, for half a breath, Noah saw the folded yellow corner of his mother's drawing and the old penciled line near the edge. Pulse dampener before bypass. He whispered, "Dad, that's Mom's word." Marcus closed the tray gently, but Evelyn's gaze had already dropped to the toolbox. Victor stepped sideways, blocking her view of the stage camera at the exact moment Whitman slipped the intake clipboard under his arm. It was a small movement, almost nothing, but Marcus saw the corner of his rejected code, CB417, on a page Whitman had claimed did not exist. Marcus did not move toward Whitman. He did not point at the clipboard. He only looked at the corner of the page long enough for Whitman to tuck it tighter under his arm and turn his body away. Evelyn saw the movement too, but she still kept her voice level. "Dr. Price," she said, and a gray-haired man in a Carter Dynamics badge stepped out from behind the demo table. "Pull the burned controller from lab stock. Not Victor's unit. Ours." Victor's smile stayed in place, but the skin around his eyes tightened. "Ms. Carter, with respect, we don't need to turn a small calibration issue into a public examination. Then it should be easy to clear up." The crowd shifted. Someone dragged a chair back, and the sound scraped across the floor before stopping halfway. Dr. Samuel Price placed a scorched controller on the test table. The metal casing was blackened along one vent, and the air around it still carried that bitter electrical smell Marcus knew too well. Evelyn turned to him. "You said he didn't damp the pulse. Without touching our internal files. Tell me what failed." Whitman started to object. "He has no standing." Evelyn raised one hand, not sharply, just enough. "He has 3 minutes." Marcus glanced down at Noah. The boy's face was pale, but he nodded once, small and brave. Marcus set the toolbox on the floor, not the table, as if he understood the difference between being invited and taking over. He leaned close to the burned unit, hands behind his back. He did not reach for secret panels. He did not ask for tools. He only studied the smoke path, the blistered solder near the thermal bridge, and the hairline scorch that curved in the wrong direction. The room began making tiny sounds. A phone camera focusing, a heel tapping once, the air conditioning rattling through the ceiling vent. "The bypass is catching the spike," Marcus said. "But it's catching it late. You're letting the surge hit the controller before the dampener settles the load." Dr. Price's expression changed by a fraction. "How can you tell that from the casing?" Marcus pointed with one finger, still not touching. "Burn starts at the return path, not the feed. If it was humidity, the damage would spread. This is rhythm. Same mistake every cycle." Victor gave a soft laugh. "That is a beautifully confident guess." Marcus looked at him. "It's a pattern." Evelyn nodded to Dr. Price. "Run the external comparison." Dr. Price hesitated, then connected the burned controller to a protected test line. Victor's sleek module went first. The display stabilized, flickered, and began to climb. 8 seconds. 9. 10. At 11, the warning light blinked amber. Dr. Price shut it down before it failed. Victor spread his hands. "That's why we're still refining." Evelyn did not respond. She looked at Marcus's toolbox. "Do you have something that addresses that pattern?" Marcus's jaw worked once. He was not afraid of the test. He was afraid of what taking that module out would cost him if the room laughed again in front of his son. Still, he opened the toolbox. The hinges complained. Wrenches shifted. Beneath the top tray sat a small, scratched prototype wrapped in an old blue shop cloth. Noah reached for the cloth, then stopped and looked at his father for permission. Marcus nodded. Together they unwrapped it. It was not pretty. The solder was hand-done. The casing was uneven. A tiny strip of masking tape carried faded letters. LM Rev 4. Victor's face changed so quickly most people missed it. Evelyn did not. "That's an old design," Victor said. "It can't stabilize past 10 seconds. The room went quiet for the first time that morning. Dr. Price slowly lowered the connector in his hand. "Mr. Lang," he said, "no one told you what this device was designed to do." Victor's smile came back, but it no longer reached the edges. "I assumed from context." Marcus did not look triumphant. He placed the module on the test pad and stepped back. Dr. Price connected it. The numbers climbed. 7 seconds. 9. 11. 12. 13. The amber light never came on. No one clapped. No one laughed. Evelyn set her folder flat on the table, her palm resting on the Carter Dynamics logo, as if she needed the room itself to stop moving. "Seal both devices," she said quietly. "And no one deletes a second of footage from this floor." Whitman's fingers tightened around the clipboard. Noah let out a breath he had been holding and slipped his small hand into Marcus's. Marcus squeezed once, not in victory, but in warning. "Stay steady." Then Dr. Price bent closer to the module and saw, under the worn tape, a second marking almost erased by years of oil and heat. Lena Brooks' final bench test. The main stage at Carter Dynamics no longer looked like a celebration. The banners were still hanging, the spotlights were still clean and white, and Victor Lang's polished prototype still sat in its glass case. But the room had changed. People were not whispering for entertainment anymore. They were whispering because Evelyn Carter had ordered the doors held, the demo footage preserved, and every judge, technician, and contestant connected to booth C-17 brought back to the place where Marcus Brooks had been told he did not belong. Marcus entered from the side aisle with Noah close behind him, one hand resting on the boy's shoulder, the other carrying the rusty toolbox. He did not walk fast. He did not lift his chin like a man trying to prove he was important. He looked tired, careful, and steady, the way a father looks when he knows his child is watching what dignity costs. Evelyn stood near the center table with Dr. Samuel Price beside her. But she did not speak first. She let Victor step up to the microphone. "This has become emotional," Victor said, soft and disappointed, as if he were protecting the room from ugliness. "Mr. Brooks is clearly attached to an old family project. I respect that. But grief can make people see ownership where there is only coincidence." A few heads turned toward Marcus. Noah's hand tightened around the toolbox handle. Marcus only said, "My wife's name is not a coincidence." The room stilled just enough for the air conditioning to become audible. Victor lowered his eyes, performing sympathy perfectly. "And I am sorry for your loss." Then he turned to Evelyn. But Carter Dynamics cannot let an unregistered visitor derail a sanctioned innovation review. It almost worked. Whitman stepped forward with the intake clipboard and said Marcus's application had never cleared the system. The registration woman nodded behind him, pale but obedient. For a moment, the story tilted back toward Victor. No official entry, no standing, no claim. Evelyn did not rescue Marcus with emotion. She lifted one finger toward the screen. "Show the lobby camera." The screen flickered to footage from that morning. There was Marcus at the desk, denim jacket, toolbox at his feet, Noah beside him. There was the printed email. There was the badge stamped invalid. And there, half hidden by Whitman's sleeve, was a white intake envelope marked CB 417. Whitman cleared his throat. That could be any packet. Marcus looked at the screen, then at the clipboard under Whitman's arm. "Then open yours." No anger. No threat. Just a sentence too simple to dodge. Whitman's mouth tightened. Victor stepped in quickly. "We should not expose private contestant materials in public." Evelyn turned to him. "You were comfortable exposing Mr. Brooks." The second crack came from Dr. Price. He placed a service log under the document camera. Temporary bypass repaired by M. Brooks. The time was 10:12, minutes before the demo rack arrived at Victor's booth. "This proves he repaired a forklift," Victor said, smiling again. "Not that he invented anything." Marcus nodded once. "That's true." The honesty unsettled the room more than an argument would have. "It only proves I helped before I knew anyone here would listen." Noah reached into the side pocket of the toolbox and pulled out the folded blue shop cloth, holding it with both hands the way a child holds something fragile in church. He did not speak until Marcus looked down and gave a small nod. "This was around Mom's part," Noah said. "It was already in the box when we came." Evelyn's eyes moved to the cloth, then to Victor, who suddenly looked toward the camera mounted above the stage. Too late. Dr. Price placed the sealed module beside Victor's sleek prototype. Evelyn finally stepped to the microphone. "Next, we open the archive test file, the notebook scan, and the floor footage from the exact minute Mr. Brooks's intake record disappeared." On the giant screen, a loading bar appeared, and Victor's hand slipped into his pocket as if he could stop the truth before it reached 100%. The loading bar reached 100%, and the first thing the room saw was not Victor's face or Marcus's toolbox, but the timestamp, 9:18 a.m. lobby camera 3. On the giant screen, Marcus stood at the registration desk with Noah beside him, handing over the printed confirmation and the white envelope marked CB 417. The registration woman took it. Whitman stepped in from the left. His hand covered the top corner, not by accident, not for a second, but long enough to slide the envelope beneath his own review folder before Marcus's badge was stamped invalid. No one spoke. The projector hummed against the silence. Evelyn Carter did not raise her voice. "Continue." The screen changed to a system log. 9:24 a.m. intake record opened. 9:26 a.m. intake record manually removed. Authorized panel access, G. Whitman. Whitman's mouth opened, but no sound came out at first. A pen slipped from his fingers and ticked once against the stage floor. Victor turned slightly away from the camera, already preparing a new face, but Dr. Price was faster. He opened the archive test file from the sealed module. The old prototype's internal code appeared line by line, plain white text on a black screen, until one line sat larger than the rest. Lena Marcus REV4. The air seemed to leave the hall all at once. Noah's fingers closed around Marcus's hand. Marcus did not squeeze back hard. He only held steady because the boy did not need a father who shook with victory. He needed one who could stand through the truth. Evelyn nodded to Dr. Price, and the live test began under 3 cameras. Victor's polished module went first. Blue lights flashed. The numbers rose. 7 seconds. 9. 11. Then the amber warning blinked, the temperature line jumped, and the controller shut itself down with a thin electronic whine that made Noah flinch. Marcus shifted half a step in front of him without looking away from the table. Then Dr. Price connected the scratched little module from the rusty toolbox. It looked almost embarrassing under the white lights, wrapped in old tape, edges uneven, solder marks visible. The kind of thing a room full of investors would normally dismiss before it had a chance to speak. The numbers rose again. 7 seconds. 10. 13. 20. The line stayed flat. The controller stayed cool. The warning light never came on. At 30 seconds, Dr. Price lifted both hands from the table as if touching nothing was the only honest thing left to do. "This design stabilizes the fault," he said, his voice rougher than before. "And based on the notebook scan, receipt dates, internal code, and registration footage, it predates Mr. Lang's submission." Evelyn turned to Victor. "Explain why your prototype contains a control sequence derived from a file labeled Lena Marcus Rev4. Victor swallowed. The microphone caught it. A small, dry sound. "We source from many independent contractors," he said. "It's possible someone on my team. Your submission form says sole inventor." Victor looked at Whitman. Whitman looked down. That was the moment the room understood. Not because someone screamed. Not because Marcus accused. Because 2 men who had spoken all morning suddenly had nowhere safe to put their eyes. Evelyn closed the folder in front of her. The soft clap of paper sounded louder than applause would have. "Gerald Whitman is suspended pending investigation. Victor Lang's entry is disqualified and referred to legal review for intellectual property theft and fraudulent submission. Marcus Brooks's registration is restored effective immediately." No one clapped at first. The silence was too heavy for that, too full of every laugh that had been swallowed back into shame. Marcus looked at the screen where Lena's name still glowed above his. His eyes shone, but he did not wipe them. Noah whispered, "Mom was right." Marcus bent his head just enough for only his son to hear. "She was always right." Evelyn stepped away from the microphone and faced Marcus not as a charity case, not as a poor man with a lucky box, but as the person whose work had just saved the machine her company could not fix. "Mr. Brooks," she said quietly, "the invention is yours." Marcus laid one hand on the rusty toolbox, the same box they had mocked, the same box they tried to close, and for the first time all day, nobody in the room dared call it junk. But when the truth finally gave him power, Marcus did not look at Victor. He looked at Noah, then at Lena's name, as if deciding what kind of man he would be now that the room had gone silent. The applause came late, and when it came, Marcus did not seem to know what to do with it. He stood beside the test table with Noah's hand in his, the rusty toolbox resting between his boots, while security escorted Gerald Whitman from the stage and Carter Dynamics legal staff quietly collected Victor Lang's badge, tablet, and sealed prototype. Victor did not shout. Men like him rarely did when the room stopped believing them. He only kept saying, "My attorneys will respond." But his voice had lost the smoothness that had carried him through the morning. Evelyn Carter waited until the noise settled before she turned back to Marcus. "Mr. Brooks, Carter Dynamics owes you a public correction, a restored filing, and a formal licensing offer." Marcus looked at the screen where the words Lena Marcus REV4 still glowed. "Put her name first." Evelyn paused. Not because she disagreed, but because she understood what he was really asking. Not money first. Not status. Not revenge. Memory. "Lena Brooks will be listed as co-inventor," she said. First on the record. Noah pressed his sleeve against his face before anyone could see him cry, but Marcus saw. He knelt right there on the polished stage, lowering himself to his son's height while cameras watched from every corner. "You did good," he whispered. "You told the truth when your hands were shaking." Noah's voice broke. "Did we save it?" Marcus looked at the toolbox, at the old tape on the handle, at the dents he had once been too ashamed to replace. "No," he said softly. "Your mama saved it. We just carried it." Evelyn heard that, and something in her face changed from authority to respect. Later, in a glass conference room overlooking the emptying fair floor, she did not slide a blank check across the table. She placed down 3 documents: a corrected invention record, a legal protection order preserving Marcus and Lena's claim, and a new Carter Dynamics policy requiring independent inventors to receive time-stamped digital copies, camera-backed intake logs, and legal review before any submission could be rejected. "What happened to you?" Evelyn said. "Will not become a company apology that dies in a press release." Marcus read every page slowly, his work-worn finger following the lines. "What about the workers?" Evelyn looked up. "Which workers?" "The woman at registration, the forklift crew, people who follow rules written by people above them." He folded his hands. "Hold accountable the ones who stole. Train the ones who were taught not to see us." For the first time that day, Evelyn did not answer immediately. Then she nodded. "That is fair." There was no sudden romance, no promise dressed up as gratitude, only a quiet beginning of trust between 2 adults who had both seen what pressure could do to people. She had power. Marcus had proof. But what made her keep looking at him was the part no contract could buy. He had protected his son, saved a worker from blame, and asked for justice without cruelty. Before they left, Evelyn walked them back to the exhibit floor. The crowd was mostly gone. A few chairs sat crooked. A paper cup rolled softly under a table. On the main stage, Dr. Price had placed the rusty toolbox inside a clear display case beside the restored module and a copy of Lena's first drawing. Beneath it, a temporary card had been printed in plain black letters. "Rust does not mean worthless." Noah stood very still, reading the words twice. Marcus rested one hand on his shoulder. Around them, the remaining staff grew quiet, not with shock this time, but with understanding. The box that had been pushed with a shoe, mocked as junk, and nearly hidden from the truth now stood under the brightest light in the room. Marcus did not smile big. He simply picked up his gloves, tucked the corrected filing under his arm, and walked out with his son beside him, leaving behind the kind of silence that does not humiliate anyone, but teaches everyone that dignity does not need to shout. Sometimes it waits in an old toolbox until the truth is ready to become a miracle.